Seeking answers to age-old questions. Deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media. This is the Kev Baker Show. And now, here is your host, Kev Baker.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Another week of live radio right here with me, your host, Kev Baker. You guessed it, right time, right place for the Kev Baker Show live. Right here on Truth Frequency Radio, and that's tfrlive.com. Hope you've all had a really nice weekend out there. I totally unplugged from the Matrix over the weekend. My batteries are recharged and I am raring to go. We'll get a bit of housekeeping out of the way first before we get into this tonight, because we're obviously going to be joined by my good friend, fellow host on the network, Anthony Patch. He's here with me tonight. Then tomorrow night, Ben Emlyn Jones. He is back with us. We'll be catching up on his recent award-winning experience where he won the UFO Mastermind Award in the UK. And then we've got Gary Wayne. We'll be catching up with Tony about that as the show progresses, because that's going to be a really big show on Wednesday night. And then to round off the week, one of my favourite guests, one of the best guys in the whole world, Bill Bean. He's going to be back on here, the spiritual warrior. So another huge week of radio right here on the Kev Baker Show. And you know, it's a very, very sad day because America witnessed its most brutal massacre overnight. And this was, of course, in Las Vegas, when 58 people so far have lost their lives, over 500 injured, after a gunman opened fire from a 32nd floor hotel window of the Mandalay Bay Hotel in Las Vegas. Now, just across the road from that hotel was a rock concert going on. And this was the Route 91 Harvest Festival. It was all country and western music. Over 20,000 music goers there, men, women and children. And I woke up this morning to footage and the audio of what had been unfolding in Las Vegas overnight. And when I first heard those shots ringing out, I must admit I feared the worst. And by that I mean I feared actual kill rate, if that's the right way to put this, far, far higher than the 58 we have seen so far. Now, it's far too early to call this anyway false flag, real event. Who honestly knows? Anyone that listens to the Kev Baker Show knows that I rarely commit very early when it comes to these events. We're going to have to wait to see what happens as the information comes to us, because in the immediate hours after these things, all of it's really just hearsay, just rumours, and we can't really base any real opinion on that. But you can bet your bottom dollar that no matter what kind of agenda they play out in the background to this, the motives that this man may or may not have had, this is going to be used to divide people in America yet again. At a time when the national anthem and taking the knee's been used to divide people in America. You know, you've got Antifa talking about some kind of uprising in October that's going to bring down the government. And right now, when I look in at America from the outside, it's in a very, very perilous position indeed. So joining me tonight to briefly touch upon this and to get into a whole lot more is my good friend, colleague here on the network, Mr. Anthony Patch. And of course, Anthony comes with a 27-year background being a paramedic up in the Oakland area. So when it comes to these situations, unfortunately, Tony has first-hand experience. But Tony, I woke up this morning and got me up to watch the news unfolding. And like I said there in opening, it's hard to talk about because it's just terrible. An act of pure evil, as Donald Trump said. But when we listen to those rounds popping off constantly, a pause, reload, going again, I honestly thought we'd be looking at a death toll into the hundreds, Tony.
Yeah, I echo that with you. I am quite surprised that we didn't have 100 to 200 people that were mowed down. This was a shooting gallery. This was a position of high advantage as a active shooter situation. I will offer this right off the bat, folks. If you find yourself in a panic crowd situation, as Kev said, I've got the background to be able to give you this advice. The crowd will tend to run in one direction. Go 90 degrees opposite, okay? Go 90 degrees to the flow of the crowd. Therefore, you will not be trampled. Most people are injured and even killed in stampedes beyond the death toll due to the actual bomb or shooting event. So go 90 degrees to the flow of the crowd and you will find cover and concealment much more readily and avoid the crowd. I'm not saying avoid venues like this. I'm just saying if you're going to go to, soft target venues like this, crowd psychology takes over, fight or flight, and you need to think above that. You need to think if you're going to be in a crowd situation, a venue such as this, think about it ahead of time. What would I do? This is not paranoia. This is just good street sense that I'm providing to you. Know your exits, whether you're inside a building or you're in a outdoor venue like this. People have said, well, we had to, hop fences and things like that. Well, that's typical. So know where your outs are. Something goes down. You don't have to think. You don't have to look. You can react because that's what your body's going to do. It is just going to react. From my training in the military as well as a paramedic, it's your training that you fall back on instinctively, and your training carries you through the event. Your training is based upon pre-planning of an area you're entering, knowing your exits, and then allowing your instincts to take over, because they will in a panic situation. And therefore, you can have the presence of mind to head opposite to where the flow of the crowd is going. And in this case, I'm advising you, go 90 degrees, seek your cover and concealment, and stay there until law enforcement gives you the all clear.
Absolutely. And like I say, when most of these events unfold now, I've been caught out in the past where I have ran with some of the rumours, some of the disinformation that comes out in the immediate aftermath of these events. And what I tend to do now is just to let the dust settle. There's a few strange things, right enough, that has cropped up with this today, namely the shooter himself. This is a Stephen Paddock, 64. I mean, they spoke to this guy's family, Tony. I mean, there's been no kind of indication anything like this was ever going to be happening with this individual. I know we're hearing rumours now that he may have converted to ISIS recently. He may have had Antifa literature and memorabilia in the room, all of which pure conjecture. But there's something almost, if we were going more generic and talking about these events, not looking at the Las Vegas one, Tony, it'd be very easy to set somebody up in a hotel room and then leave propaganda lying around that would point to one group or another that would again stoke division. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, that's a typical modus operandi for these scapegoat shooting situations. I'm not saying that it's pertinent to this one. It may come out, but my approach is yours, and that is I'm just going to let the information flow, let it come out from whatever sources, and then, just examine it myself. My approach at this point is really just prayers for the victims, the survivors, and their families, and those that know these people that are the victims, and also the first responders, having been one for many years. This is hard on first responders, paramedics, EMTs, police officers, firefighters. And then in the hospitals, you have the emergency rooms being overrun. You had pickup trucks with victims dropping people virtually at the front door of the hospital unannounced. And when you're in a hospital situation, you don't really know what's going on in the outside world. And all of a sudden you are inundated in a mass casualty event. And they train for this. There's protocols, but it takes time to call in extra staff. It takes time to bring in surgeons from home, things like that. and it's really, really hard on the hospital staff as well. So I would urge folks to extend your prayers to the folks that have to take care of the victims, because they're human beings as well. And this can really traumatize even the most hardened when you are overwhelmed with numbers of victims and you don't have the psychological preparation that is afforded to you when you hear the paramedics call into the emergency room and they're giving their report as they're transporting, and you know what's coming and you can be prepared for it. But when it drops in your lap, even in an emergency room situation, it is really tough to deal with in the moment. And then usually about 24 hours later, the staff begin to feel the psychological effects of what they've just been confronting. So a lot of victims to go around, and that's where my thoughts and prayers and concentration is on right now, rather than the conspiratorial. And I think, Kev, you'll echo that with me.
Absolutely. Well said, Tony, because a lot of the time we do forget the effect that this will have on the emergency responders. You know, we sit and we analyse these things and look for crisis actors here and indiscrepancies there, but the real human cost of this, and you're right there, and I've often thought about this in the past. I mean, I could not do the kind of work that you used to do, Tony, the work that these brave men and women do in the hospitals as well. So I take my hats off to all of them, and obviously thoughts and prayers go out to anyone affected by this. So then, Mr. Patch, where are we going to start tonight? Because you were telling me something about how AI can smell me now, and that doesn't sound good at all.
Yeah, so here's the question I'll put out to the audience. We think of AI as something that is basically a computational machine. And if it is being designed and touted for things like, you know, medical breakthroughs and other things, why? Why does a machine need to be able to smell? Yes, you can apply it to things like detection of, you know, food contamination, food that is spoiling, things like that. There are some things you can reach out to, but you really have to look at it in the context of what we're going to share with you tonight. We've got a couple of articles, a couple of research papers we're going to give you some details on, because we're covering science here tonight. And that is, why do the machines have to have all five senses? I mean, really, we're talking about a computational device.
Tony, can I give you my initial thought on that, just as you're in there? Because, you know, we've looked at Geordie Rose, and he's talking about kindred AI and the need to actually let these robots and the AI grow up in the real world. That will lead to consciousness. Now, putting myself in their shoes, going down their kind of level of thinking, maybe they're seeing the five senses that we have as being an integral part of that consciousness spark. So if they can give the AI as close or as artificial a copy of what we've got, voila, they'll get their consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. You don't want it to be, you know, going through sensory deprivation, so to speak. So I would agree with you. Yeah, it does enhance, it does help with that whole idea of consciousness and then sentient awareness. So I'll give it that much. Sure. Yeah.
Of course, you know, you could always just have it into the airports and everything else. I mean, you could have it in the hotels now, smelling for gunpowder and stuff like that. That'll be the next thing in these kind of mega cities, the smart cities like we've got here in Glasgow. It's going to be smelling everything in your bags.
Yeah, in the United States, they use beagles as bomb detection devices because of their, you know, profound sense of smell. So I could see it being used for things like that, and that's beneficial. Those are benevolent applications. But I think where you and I are going is that it does add to this whole thing of replicating human beings and being able to supplant and, you know, somehow surpass the human being. But I've said it before, you know, in the last couple of weeks, I've been ranting about, you know, God is not going to allow AI ever to even equal, much less exceed the human brain's capabilities, and that he is actually transforming and augmenting our minds, our brains, our quantum computers as I speak. But I won't go down that road today. We're going to stick to the nuts and bolts.
Well, I was waiting for you there, Tony.
That's okay. So we're also going to touch on later on in the show, we're going to go into the October issue of Entangled magazine. It is out. Subscribers got them hot off the press right at 1 minute after midnight on the 1st of October, thanks to our publishers, Robbie and Cheryl Spencer from SE Studios. They're the ones who really do the hard work, pulling all of these articles together. So we're going to go through some of the topics that are enclosed in the Entangled issue, the October issue, because we are going to, if you want to break out your favorite search engine, and after our first break, we're going to talk about Populus, Populus. We're going to talk about Populus. We're going to talk about brain hacking. The whole entire issue, in essence, has been devoted to mind control. Go ahead, Kev.
You know, working with Dr. Karlstrom, as we have been doing, Tony, it's quite profound. It's quite staggering, the actual extent of these mind control programs and just the level that they're able to manipulate us at. And we all know about MK Ultra. All of those papers have been declassified. I sometimes wonder what it's going to be like 50 years into the future when people find out the kind of stuff that they were doing right now, Tony, because the mind control aspect of it, like I've said to you before, I never comprehended they would be going right down to the quantum level to actually manipulate our very thoughts and memories.
Yeah, exactly. And I detail this in the October issue. I have spent, since we started in June, building a foundation of background information regarding quantum computers, how our brains are quantum computers, and I actually go down to the quantum level and explain what mind control and the technologies of mind control that are being employed. I get right down to the definitive explanation. So I encourage you to subscribe. I want to thank everybody who has subscribed to Entangled. It has been amazing, the response that we've received. Tremendous support from you, the audience, and we thank you for that, because that helps Kevin and myself keep going and keep doing the research that you don't have the time to do. It gives us the ability to have the time to do your research. So it's a recursive process, if I can play on the words a little bit, Kev. You help us, we help you, and in turn, you help us again in appreciating the information that we dig up and send to you. Really, the things that Kev and I talk about, and all of our authors in Entangled magazine, because it's not just Kev and myself, we have other people that are contributing authors. They're researchers in their own way, and we'll get into some of the names of those people later. But the point here is we are putting out information that really, I believe, unless you did the research in the broad spectrum of sources that Kev and I tap into, you're not going to see this information anywhere else. And we have pulled it together so that it makes sense, so that it's simple to find and to access, and we do the translation so that it is digestible information, while at the same time being scientifically specific and scientifically accurate. So I'll give you an example. What does it mean when we talk about mind control? Well, I get into talking about MRI machines, millimeter wave technology utilizing your MRI machine, and even how that relates to 5G technology. When we talk about targeted individuals, we talk about controlling somebody's mind. I actually break it down and show you how that is done in the nuts and bolts, the actual technology. And to put a final spin on it, and that is a purposeful spin and pun, is this is about altering the spin of the quantum particles within your brain, within your quantum computer. Now, what does that mean to alter the spin? It means to change the angular momentum of quantum particles in your brain. That is the essence of the mechanics of mind control. And then I detail it and lay it all out for you, as well as other authors, especially in the October issue. We have Professor Paul, as I call him, Professor Truth, and his A-team, who last month and this month have contributed a large volume of work from their research. And this month it is specific to mind control. And I think that that is appropriate, given the tragedy of this weekend, that this issue is dealing with mind control. That's about as far as I'm going to apply that to the tragic events in Las Vegas. Go ahead, Kev.
Now, this 5G rollout as well, I mean, for me, this is like some kind of directed energy weapon, because this truly is a weaponized system of control. And with the Internet of Things and everything else upon us now, I mean, we often talk about, Tony, how to say 2030, 2050, stuff like that. This stuff is already here. It's already all around us. And that's why it's imperative that we continue to cover all of this. And that 5G alone, I mean, think of the ability that it's got, or the capability it's got to control populations en masse, especially in these big cities, Tony.
It does, and I think some people may be familiar with the recent stories in New York City of these metallic towers with three stripes, horizontal stripes on them, and they have a placard on them, and they are found at the bridges and tunnels of New York. This is all part of a toll collection system. This is an automatic toll collection 5G-based system. Now, they don't tell you that it's 5G, but that's the technology that is able to do that. This is nothing more than an MRI technology that's been applied to the public as the vehicles travel by, and they read the sensors. If they don't have the sensors on board the vehicle, they read the license plate. This is all the facial recognition that comes out of our discussions of not only 5G, but the quantum computers, the AI systems. And this is where D-Wave began with their prototypes, was in developing for Google the facial recognition systems that were necessary for monitoring and tracking people as well as vehicles themselves. So what you have in New York is the application of AI, 5G, facial recognition of the AI specifically, and then applied to also capturing the license plates so they can collect their money from people rather than having a human being do that at a toll booth. So 5G is definitely here. It is applied. We read the articles. We know that it is not 2020 and 2030 for application of this stuff. And it all ties back into mind control, because I break it down definitively how 5G and MRIs are tied together.
You know, mind control, it's been in the news just recently, folks. And how we haven't covered this on the Kev Baker Show is beyond me. But there's been something happening at the US Embassy in Cuba. And it says here, the mystery of sonic weapon attacks at the US Embassy in Cuba deepens. It says the blaring, grinding noise jolted the American diplomat from his bed in a Havana hotel. He moved just a few feet and there was silence. I climbed back into bed. Inexplicably, the agonizing sound hit him again. It was as if he had walked through some invisible wall cutting straight through his room. Soon came the hearing loss, the speech problems, symptoms both similar and altogether different from others amongst the at least 21 US victims in an astonishing international mystery still unfolding in Cuba. Now, Tony, this is all about sonic weapon attacks down at the US Embassy there in Cuba. But here, this is out in the mainstream, in the public, how this kind of mind control, these new silent weapons are being deployed against people right now.
Yeah, and we've covered all of the active denial, microwave, directed energy weapon for crowd control scenarios and the weaponry that's been openly used. The reason that they bring this out in public, and this is part of what you and I do, Kev, is to look at it from 30,000 feet. Why bring the Cuban story out into the public consciousness? again, it is to say, we have the weapons to control you. Therefore, when we as the authority tell you to do something, you must obey. And it becomes an automatic response. In your human nervous system, you have what is known as the autonomic nervous system. That's what controls your heart rate. That's what controls your breathing when you are not consciously, actively modifying your own rate of breathing and your own heart rate. We're going to break and we'll pick it up.
Hold that thought, Mr. Patch. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
Welcome back, everyone. You're tuned into the Kev Baker Show, live right here on TFRlive.com. I'm joined tonight by Anthony Patch, and you can find all of his work in Tangled E-Magazine, the full range of his books over at anthonypatch.com. Tonight we're getting into all things AI yet again. And you know, just before the break there, we were talking about mind control and a strange story that's been in the media, the mainstream media, no less, about sonic weapons that have been used on the US Embassy down in Cuba. And when it comes to the mainstream, and this is why it's important, kind of always have to watch what they're pushing, because everything that they publish and every story that they push, it's for an agenda. You know, if they didn't want you looking at something, they just wouldn't publish it. That's why we brought up this sonic weapon attack or whatever kind of incident has been happening down in Cuba. They want people to know about it. They want people to know that they have that technology. And if you step back even further and look what else is going on in America right now that the mainstream media are just paying 24/7 attention to, it's this whole NFL debacle, taking the knee, the national anthem. You know, they just want people divided. They don't care what side you actually fall on, whether you're for the protest, against the protest. They just want you to get angry. They just want you to take a side. You know, if it wasn't for that, that's the only reason they're pushing it in the news constantly. That's why they're the mainstream. They're pushing agendas. And when you see stories, no matter how minor they may be, you always have to ask yourself, well, what else is going on here, really? So, to get back into all of this with my good friend, Mr. Anthony Patch. And that's why, Tony, I know you hate looking at the mainstream media, but for me personally, I actually enjoy going in there and seeing what they're pushing on people, because everything, it's all agenda-based, it's all psychological. And if they didn't want us to know about certain things or didn't want us to react over one thing or another, they just wouldn't publish it, Tony.
Yeah, how very true. It is all, as far as I'm concerned, psychological operations. The most powerful tool is the mind. If you can affect the mind, either through the nuts and bolts of AI and 5G and MRIs, as well as affecting people theologically as to their belief system, and then also apply fear, which is probably the biggest motivator, is fear of injury and death, that fight or flight mechanism that we all have that is housed in our brainstem, the first brain, if you will. If you can appeal to their fear, then you have the greatest opportunity to control and to manipulate people. Part of what I think you and I do, Kev, is to, again, push this 30,000-foot perspective. It is easy to get into dissecting an incident like Las Vegas. It is easy to get into the deep woo of targeted individuals and demons and all these other things. And yet, I think it's our responsibility to be good observers, to stand outside the box that they're trying to put us in and present that different perspective and hopefully provide the opportunity to change the paradigms within the minds of our audiences. Now, it sounds like we're applying psychology. Well, quite honestly, we are. We are taking on that role of applying the psychological tools to counter the psychological tools of the enemy. And we oftentimes speak of the chessboard, and that is legitimate. These are games that they're playing with us. And when you realize that you are being gamed, I think that you would agree with me that it irritates you, that it brings up anger, that you fight back against it, because people don't like to be fooled. Sure, we like to be entertained, by choice entertained, but we do not like being manipulated. We don't like being fooled. We don't like being gamed by a nefarious authoritarian structure or person. And I don't like being played with. I don't like being put in the position of being a pawn. And that's why I do the research that I do, so that I can share what I discover in the technological aspects of the game. And then you bring in the observations of what's happening in the popular culture, what's happening in the mainstream media, et cetera. And we combine those two so that people have a clearer picture of the game that we are unfortunately fully immersed in. But we have to realize that it's a game so that we have a different perspective and we can go against the flow if we feel the need to. Go ahead, sir.
No, I couldn't have said it better myself, Tony. I really couldn't have. And, you know, they hate when people take that kind of 30,000-foot elevated approach at looking at things and looking at all sides of what's going on, because it's only when you do that that it becomes clearer that everything is an agenda. And we talk about psychological warfare a lot on here, but every aspect of our life right now has got psychological warfare tied to it. It really does. Be it the programming that we get via the mainstream, be it the mainstream news itself, all of it psychologically weaponized. So then, talking of weaponizing things, Tony, we often talk about AI. And I've got a little video here for us to listen to. We'll probably end up ripping it apart on the other side, because this video is entitled, "What Will Happen After We Invent an AI That Is Smarter Than Us?"
Hollywood movies make people worry about the wrong things in terms of superintelligence. What we should really worry about is not malice, but competence. Where we have machines that are smarter than us, whose goals just aren't aligned with ours. For example, I don't hate ants. I don't go out of my way to stomp on an ant if I see one on the sidewalk. But if I'm in charge of this hydroelectric dam construction, and just as I'm going to flood this valley with water, I see an anthill there, you know, tough luck for the ants, right? Their goals weren't aligned with mine. And because I'm smarter, it's going to be my goals, not the ants' goals, that get fulfilled. We never want to put humanity in the role of those ants. On the other hand, it doesn't have to be bad if you solve the goal alignment problem, right? Little babies tend to be in a household surrounded by human-level intelligences that are smarter than the babies, namely their parents, right? And that works out fine because the goals of the parents are wonderfully aligned with the goals of the child. So it's all good. And this is one vision that a lot of AI researchers have, the friendly AI vision, that we will succeed in not just making machines that are smarter than us, but also machines that then learn, adopt, and retain our goals as they get ever smarter. It might sound easy to get machines to learn, adopt, and retain our goals, but these are all very tough problems. First of all, if you take your self-driving taxi and tell it in the future to take you to the airport as fast as possible, and then you get there covered in vomit and chased by helicopters, and you say, no, that's not what I wanted. And it replies, that is exactly what you asked for. Then you've appreciated how hard it is to get a machine to understand your goals, your actual goals. You know, a human cab driver would have realized that you also had other goals that were unstated because she was also a human and has all this shared reference frame. But a machine doesn't have that unless we explicitly teach it that, right? And then once the machine understands our goals, there's a separate problem of getting them to adopt the goals. Anyone who's had kids knows how big the difference is between making the kids understand what you want and actually adopt your goal to do what you want. And finally, even if you can get your kids to adopt your goals, that doesn't mean they're going to retain them for life, right? My kids are a lot less excited about Lego now than they were when they were little. And we don't want machines, as they get ever smarter, to gradually change their goals away from being excited about protecting us and thinking of this thing about taking care of humanity as just this little childhood thing like Legos that they get bored with eventually. If we can solve all three of these challenges, getting machines to understand our goals, adopt them, and retain them, then we can create an awesome future. Because everything I love about civilization is the product of intelligence. Then if we can use machines to amplify our intelligence, then we have this potential to solve all the problems that are stumping us today and create a better future than we even dare to dream of. If machines ever surpass us and can outsmart us at all tasks, that's going to be a really big deal. Because intelligence is power. The reason that we humans have more power on this planet than tigers is not because we have larger muscles or sharper claws, right? It's because we're smarter than the tigers. And in this exact same way, if machines are smarter than us, it becomes perfectly plausible for them to control us and become the rulers of this planet and beyond. And when I.J. Good made this famous analysis of how you could get an intelligence explosion, where intelligence just kept creating greater and greater intelligence, leaving us far behind, he also mentioned that this superintelligence would be the last invention that man need ever make. And what he meant by that, of course, was that so far, the most intelligent being on this planet that's been doing all the inventing, it's been us. But once we make machines that are better than us at inventing, all future technology that we ever need can be created by those machines if we can make sure that they do things for us that we want.
The last ever human invention. What a terrible thought. Did you hear him there? His name is Mark Tegbark, and he's talking about how we never want to put humanity into the role of the ants, Tony.
That is true. You know, at first I thought that was Elon Musk who was talking.
We've got more of him as the show progresses, but I'm sure you're champing at the bit here to take apart what this guy was saying.
Well, I appreciate his analogy. Again, this echoes Elon Musk and his, warning us that we may be rendered to the level, the equivalent of a house pet in the face of the advancement of AI, in which he's saying that this is about competence, and the analogy of the anthill in the face of flooding the valley because you just put up a hydroelectric dam project. I appreciate that analogy because this really is now a situation in which AI is here. I would say it's fully formed, not to its ultimate potential, but it's fully formed in the sense of being sentient and self-aware. I refer you back to the discussion that Kev and I had a couple of weeks ago about Zbigniew-Brzezinski's paper in 1970 and his book talking about technology and saying that they already had a sentient computer that was self-aware. They called it the Beast. They called it 666, and it was in Brussels. Now, this was a transistor-based supercomputer that was already AI back in the 70s. This was not a projection. This was a statement of real-time fact. Now, if you go to the paradigm-changing advent of qubits and adiabatic quantum computers, who knows how far the AI has already advanced? Again, I will say it is not equivalent or surpassing all of the capabilities of a human mind. But if we look at it in strict terms of computational capabilities, yes, it's exceeded what we would consider to be the human's ability to run computations. It's exceeded that, but it's not achieved even in its sentient status any measure of superior ability in terms of the soul, the consciousness, and even memories. I still maintain that it cannot retain the memories that a human mind can retain because of the complexities of those memories. But what what do we do? If we accept my statement that AI is already so advanced, what do we do then as human beings? Can we regulate something in which the genie is already out of the bottle? There are a lot of discussions about the philosophical implications, the societal, the socio-economic, in terms of job displacement. All of those things, I think, are moot points. Those are moot discussions. Everything has already developed in the world of AI to the point where there's really nothing we can do to stop the progress of AI. So the question becomes, can you even regulate it? No, you cannot. There's too much in the way of not only profit motivation, but the spiritual motivation to this, because you cannot separate the spiritual from the physical. The spiritual agenda, I'm not talking theological, I'm talking spiritual agenda that is pushing AI, means that we as human beings, ourselves individually, have nothing that we can do to influence the further advancement of AI. It's already too far along. That ship has sailed. So now the question becomes, what do I do as an individual facing this and not knowing the full extents of the abilities of the AI system, because it is occulted? What do I do as an individual? So I'm going to toss it to you, Kev. What do you think people should do individually if they accept the scenario and the picture that I have just painted for the audience?
Well, we've said it before often enough on this show, Tony. I think the only kind of protection from any of this that's coming upon us is the Holy Spirit, and we'll call that the Holy Firewall, because that really is the only thing that's going to protect us from this beast system. You know, you're going back to the 70s there, and the fact that they had a computer called the Beast. That should tell people everything they need to know about these characters we're dealing with. But when it comes to AI, even the most cutting-edge boffins who are writing these algorithms, they'll be the first ones to tell you they've no idea what's going on in the, air quotes, mind of this AI. And the guy said it himself there in the video, Mark Tegbark. He's one of these physicists, he's one of these rock star ones you see on all the programs, so he's very, very agenda-based usually, but he was talking about an AI and the fact that we'll have to learn, adopt, and retain our goals. Now, that's all very easily said, and I'm sure to start with, the AI is going to absolutely do that. But he admitted himself that over time, these things will evolve. Maybe its worldviews will shift. And he also said that eventually, one day, these machines will go on to rule the planet and beyond. I mean, maybe it's just me that found something a bit weird about that, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird. It's already so far beyond our control, then it is ominous. I don't think we can escape the ominous aspects to this. There's a great article in Entangled magazine this month, and this was written by Lauren Patterson, and he's part of the Alpha team, as we call it, Professor Truth's Alpha team. And Lauren put together a very long, extensive breakdown on AI and gets into all of these facets that I just listed out for you, the socioeconomic, the philosophical, the theological, the spiritual, and the technological. And he refers to this as genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, in other words, GRAIN, G-R-A-I-N, GRAIN, replacing biology with genealogy. So the whole idea of the synthetic biology, let me do this for you. Let me summarize it. If you picture biological organisms that are reproducing in a petri dish, in a growth medium, and these cells, if you watch them under a microscope, just a low power microscope, you'll see that the cell mitosis, the self-division, the multiplication through division process happening right before your eyes. It's normal biology. Apply that to the ability to reproduce synthetic qubits, quantum bits, for the AI to multiply through division, through cell mitosis, of what I have described for a couple of years now with you, Kev, the notion of warm and wet qubits. These are qubits that are literally built as biological cells that reproduce. And when I get into talking about things like D-Wave having warm and wet qubits beginning at the 10th model with 65,536 qubits, and then going out to the 16th model, the 16th model being defined as the finite number of their advancing of models, because it's based on geomancy. And geomancy has a limitation mathematically to 65,536 permutations of their tables. But without going down the trail yet, maybe we'll get into that a little bit further, the geomancy. But that's the basis for the mathematics that are employed by adiabatic quantum computers, has its roots in geomancy. And I lay that out along with author Kathleen Urquhart in her fabulous article this year on geomancy. But when you get to the 16th model of the D-Wave computers with warm and wet qubits, biological qubits, biologically replicating qubits, just as cell mitosis takes place, you're at 4,194,304 qubits contained within the 16th model. Now, this year, they only released the 5th model, which was the 2048 qubits. That's a long way from over 4 million. How do you get there? Cell mitosis, my friend. Go ahead.
See, Tony, way ahead of the curve. So you are, man. But no, 2 secs. Sorry, I just got caught up. Somebody sent me some information there on something we were talking about earlier. But Johnny Whistles, he's in the chat room. He'll be joining us after the break. But it's just fascinating hearing you talking about all of this, Tony, and get more confirmations coming in all the time.
Yeah, we really do. And I want to commend the Alpha team who put together very long, extensive articles this month. And, you know, it sounds like an infomercial, folks, but we all put a lot of hours and hours and hours of time and research, and then the research is combined and distilled down into long articles. And those take a lot of time because you can't say everything that you want to say, but you try to pull it together. So for $24.99 a year, you get 12 issues that are each issue well over 100 pages. I think this one was 114 pages. You're getting a book every month. You're getting a research book. This is all information from each of these authors that come from the white papers, the peer-reviewed papers coming out of the laboratories. This isn't just speculation. This isn't, information that we're just theorizing about. We look at the actual nuts and bolts that's going on with AI, biology, DNA, Dr. Craig Venter, all of those things. Let me overlay again AI and biology and Dr. Craig Venter. Going back about 5 years ago, Kev, you're familiar with this. He was saying that biological modification is the science of today and of the future. He said it will lead all disciplines of science. Biology will. It will mean everything. You will be able to build structures on planets using biology. You'll be able, obviously, to grow biological life forms. I didn't say humans. I said biological life forms on other planets. Everything is biology in the world of Dr. Craig Venter, human genomics, digitized DNA, sequencing of the human genome. Why do I put AI with that? Because Dr. Craig Venter 5 years ago said AI will be responsible for running the millions of permutations of possible genetic coding modifications, patterns of coding. Think of it like software programming.
Tony, I don't think it would be possible without AI to do that, the amount of calculations that you're talking about here.
That is correct. Just looking at the DNA of the human being when it is just broken down through sequencing of DNA and digitizing it, it's a massive undertaking just to extract the raw data. Now to manipulate it, to model it in silico, as I've presented in a couple of articles since June in my magazine, our magazine, the group magazine, Entangled. We lay it all out for you, folks. We show you actually how this is all happening. AI is driving biology. So it is not just AI that will exceed the human and renders possibly as a pet, but it is the biology that is actually ahead of the discussion of AI. The biological research is what led to the development of AI. So we're going to talk about that again after the break here. But the deep machine learning is based on biology, not the other way around. Go ahead, Kev.
Very interesting. And when we come back after the break as well, Mr. Whistles will be here with us. And, you know, Tony, I'm sorry I got a bit lost there a couple of moments ago, but it's one of these shows where we're getting so much information coming in because we opened up the show, obviously, about the Las Vegas shooting, and I want to thank all the listeners out there for sending me various links and various things to look at. I won't be able to do it during this show, obviously, but again, thanks to all the audience out there. Now, don't forget, tomorrow night, Ben Emlyn Jones will be here, but we'll be back after the break with the whistles and news from Elon Musk. Don't go anywhere.
You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Hour number 2 right here on the Kev Baker Show on TFRlive.com. Now, don't forget, you can check out my work over at the website, kevbakershow.com. Anthony Patch is here with us tonight as well. Check out his work, anthonypatch.com. And the man you have all been waiting for, Mr. Johnny Whistles. How you doing, big man? Weekend out the way and raring to go, I hope?
Oh, definitely, Kev. Look forward to the Monday show. As you know, I like to stay off the internet over the weekend and seeing all the crazy things that are going on. It was a breath of fresh air coming on and listening to two geniuses. Fantastic. So looking forward to the show tonight. Always great to have Tony here.
Well, it's always great to add that third genius to the mix, Whistles. And I took a leaf out of your book, brother. I really did. I totally unplugged from that internet matrix this weekend. And you're right, man. I feel all the better for it. You know, for as much as we can learn and the brilliant connections that we make via the internet, we have to find a balance. And that's for everyone out there. You know, it's a double-edged sword because the more time we spend on the internet, you really, I mean, it's only when you step away from it that you realize how much time and energy you're investing into that. So it's about finding that balance. Now then, let's get back to Anthony Patch, because during the break, Tony, you were teasing myself and Johnny talking about transformations that are going to be coming our way. And this is something, again, that's been covered in Entangled this month as well, right?
Yeah, again, I'd like to refer to Lauren Peterson's article. He calls this his GRAIN system, GRAIN, and that's genetics, robotics, AI, and nanotechnology all being brought together sort of under this one umbrella that he has come up with. And it's about must be 12 or 15 page article, a great breakdown. I'm going to give you one excerpt. He says, why do we need this thing to begin with? He's talking about AI. Defining the quote, unquote, thing is the challenge. For GRAIN, the emphasis is on enhancement. Now, I define enhancement by describing our transformation and augmentation that those with the Holy Spirit are undergoing right now in the present time. And we are being transformed and augmented with greater capabilities. And that is because it is God, the Creator, God's design, that we not be supplanted by in my way of thinking, my way of viewing it, the evil that is behind the advancements of AI, pure and simple. So I'm going to read this to you. For Grain, the emphasis is on enhancement of humanity under the guise of incremental improvements that can be sold on a social level. Telling parents that a chip implant will improve a child's intelligence and they will better compete in a global marketplace will be proposed. Offering the rich an opportunity to prolong or achieve immortality will be enticing to some. In the medical field, the prospects of nanobots injected into the system to eradicate disease permanently will find acceptance after some successes are established. Grain will need to be marketed with tremendous financial backing and made to look appealing to the materialistic mindset of many cultures, gnosis of artificial ideologies, or the narrow way of life. So, pulling back from that again, what he's describing is the making AI warm and fuzzy to the average Joe Bag of Donuts walking down the street who has no clue what AI is all about. Now, our mission here is to try to educate Joe Bag of Donuts, make it simple, make it palatable and understandable, and give the 30,000-foot perspective as to the implications upon our literal lives of what AI means to the human race. And as I said, Kev, I'm going to wrap this up just before the break. This is biological. What we are talking about here, folks, is not being so focused on AI itself as is being pushed and warned about by people like Elon Musk, a guy that Kev and I would love to have on the show as a friend to the Kev Baker Show. Elon Musk, we put the red carpet invitation out to you. We do think that inherently you're a good guy, and we would like to have a good guy level conversation with you. But it isn't necessarily just warning people and saying the sky is falling because of AI. Understand that AI is pushing human genomics. It is pushing the change at the DNA level of what God created. And this has ramifications and applications out into all the other discussions we have here, not just DNA itself, but adiabatic quantum computers and D-Wave, and even particle accelerators and colliders at CERN. You see, this is why I focused on those three main areas of science: DNA, quantum computing / AI, and CERN with their particle physics, because all three of those push this human 2.0 through the digitizing and manipulation and changing of our DNA. AI, and I'm going to wrap this up, Kev, AI is merely the big hammer, call it Thor's hammer, if you will, the big hammer that's being applied to our DNA to beat it down on an anvil. And by the way, folks, they used an anvil, that's what they called it, when they began to slice and dice our DNA at the macroscopic, the microscopic, the atomic scale. They actually called it an anvil when they began to slice up our DNA. When they use AI as Thor's hammer to reshape on an anvil our DNA, that is where all of the disciplines in science, including particle physics, is being focused. So there you go, my friend.
Now, and you know, I've been looking at how the kind of public face of AI has been getting pushed even harder on us recently. And we often laugh and joke, guys, about the fact that D-Wave, it's like the word you can't say. Any of these journalists reporting on AI, usually the best thing in town they go to is IBM's Watson. Before the show, Tony, I was sharing with you the fact that they're really pushing this hard right now on the TV advertisements over here. And like we were talking about earlier on, I mean, if it's been pushed in the media, on TVs, stuff like that, the timing of it, there's always a reason behind it. And they're trying to push this cuddly, warm Watson that is going to be our assistant. It's going to help us in ways we could never imagine. And here's just a taste of one of the latest adverts that's been absolutely bombarded on the UK public right now. And again, this is Watson at work with wine.
Hey, Dad, come meet the new guy.
The new guy? What new guy?
I hired some help. He really knows his wine.
This is the new guy?
Hello, my name is Watson.
You know wine, huh?
I know that you should check Vineyard Block 12.
Block 12.
My analysis of satellite imagery shows it would benefit from decreased irrigation.
I was wondering about that.
Easy boy. Nice doggy.
What do you think?
Not bad.
That's the AI that they're pushing on the public, and I feel that that's the kind of image of AI that the public may have. But it goes a lot deeper than this. And I mean, who can argue against a computer that's going to help you get your vineyard producing more wine, stuff like that, right? But we're talking about this more wide, this stronger AI that Elon Musk and others are warning about. But Johnny, you must have noticed the Watson adverts over here in the UK right now. Maybe it's just me because we talk about this stuff, but it's almost as if they're bombarding us with this stuff right now.
Oh, yeah, Kev, it's going to be the kind of thing, it's like, this is going to be your new friend. We've started it off, Kev, with the Amazon, the Alexa and things like that. That's just the very start, but things are going to get a lot freakier as the years go on, because these things are going to be telling you what is good for you, what is bad for you, when to drink, when not to drink. Do you know what I mean? They're going to take over people's lives. That's the way it's going to be.
Right down to the very building blocks, our DNA base pairs, as Tony was explaining before. And Tony, I'll play this quick. This is another one that I've seen hitting the kind of TVs right now, and this is Watson at work with healthcare.
So you miss the big city?
I don't miss much. Definitely not the traffic.
Excuse me, doctor. The genomic data came in.
Thank you.
You can do that kind of analysis?
Yeah, Watson.
I can quickly analyze millions of clinical and scientific reports to help you tailor treatment options for the patient's genomic profile.
You can do that, even way out here?
Yes, even way out here.
So question, Tony and Johnny, whichever one. Is there even going to be a need for people to go to med school in the near future if this is the way things are going?
Go ahead, Johnny.
Well, I don't think so, Kev. I think it's going to be a case where machines will be doing operations like that. They've got them just now giving people injections. But this is the way it's going to go, Kev. It can only be bad for us, because once machines do everything, there's no need for as many people on the planet. Do you know what I mean? So I just see it as a bad thing. It is a fantastic thing to look at and to be able to see what it can do, Kev. But it's just a bad side. I can't see past it. I don't see any good coming out of that for us, apart from the ones that are left here.
I get exactly where you're coming from. And, you know, Tony, there's something kind of creepy when you hear IBM and their AI playing about with the genomic information.
Yes, and as we like to do, we like to look at articles and papers that are present and past. I maintain in my methodology of research that if I go back 5 or 10 years into the peer-reviewed white papers, I can see the present. In other words, I'm looking at the past to know what is going on in our present reality and in our very near tomorrow, because they tend to say 5 and 10 years ago, this is what will happen in 5 to 10 years. And therefore, you can see what's going on today. So I'm going to refer to an IBM article that comes to us from 2013. And this comes out of Paul Bloom, IBM's telecom researcher, says, coming soon, computers will use the 5 senses to enhance our lives. Okay, this is an old article. He says, imagine a world where computers smell, taste, hear, and touch. Well, that time is coming. If you saw the computer named Watson take top honors on the TV quiz show Jeopardy, you've already seen a computer that can understand and respond to humans. In the next stage of computing, which we at IBM are calling the era of cognitive systems, hardware and software will gain amazing new brain-like capabilities to learn, adapt, and sense that will fundamentally improve the way people live, work, and interact with each other. Every year, IBM makes predictions about 5 technology innovations that stand to change the way we live within the next 5 years. This year, we're focusing on the ability of humans to, in their own special way, emulate humans' 5 senses. I'm going to stop there, Kev. Last week, and before that, we talked about the emulation machines. The emulation machines as breaking news that would be applied into the sentient world simulation, that we would be emulated. We would be divided into as many as 200 versions of ourselves in this world of emulated machines in the sentient world simulation. I am now telling you in a 5-year-old article that they're using the word emulate humans' 5 senses. That is by design. While, I'm continuing the article, while that may sound implausible, consider what today is de rigueur. Smartphones and tablets didn't exist even a decade ago. Scientists and engineers continue to push advances in a variety of fields that are further improving and broadening the capabilities of computers, those involving cognitive systems and their potential for advancing numerous aspects of the human experience, from agriculture and healthcare to utility management and weather forecasting, are quite impressive. Very soon, computers will be able to see and extract minute data from medical MRIs, CT, and X-ray images, or even assess photo images of sunspots on skin. A seeing, quote, computer assessment, analysis, and recommendation will be one of the tools a doctor uses to prescribe timely and effective treatment. Okay, last paragraph. Because cognitive systems are good at detecting patterns, utility companies will one day employ vision-oriented sensors to scan photos taken in the aftermath of, wait for it, folks, in the aftermath of hurricanes and posted to social media sites. Data gathered by their process will help prioritize the deployment of repair crews to areas where safety and security risks are most acute. All right, I won't go on with the rest of it. You get a taste of this old article, and you guys talk about it, and we'll come back with a present-day article connected to this.
Now, that's really interesting how it's using that same emulated language. And, you know, you were talking there about the AI looking at photographs of skin, and this is one example where, when it comes to healthcare, that, you know, it's able to look at just images of suspected melanomas, areas of skin cancer, and it is able to absolutely nail it. Now, Johnny, that's an advancement that, I mean, who could argue against that, right? And as long as this is the argument we always put forward, John, isn't it? As long as it's assisting us in things like that and not replacing us, that's the main thing, right?
Well, Kev, the thing is, it can help us. It really can. And it is amazing. Some of the things that they come up with, things like that can detect melanomas long before any human could do. And I think that people they're being pushed to see these things, Kev, as they're going to be part of your life. It's a must-have thing. I always look at it you could take a robot, say, right, and give it the most amazing AI that you could ever think about. And you know me, Kev, I'm a hugger. I hug people all the time. Do you know what I mean? Could you imagine this robot trying to emulate? That's never going to have the feeling that I have hugging somebody, because the only thing that thinks about while it's hugging you is don't crush you hard enough that it's going to kill you. It doesn't feel anything. It's a machine, and people really need to see these things. It's just machines and AI. It's no human. There's nothing about it. There's no feeling, no empathy. Touch. When Anthony mentioned touch, there's no way that a machine can actually feel touch. It's software. It can show actually some things are happening in the software when it feels something, but it's not like us, and we can't actually look at them like us, Kev.
But what is touch, Johnny? Merely electrical signals interpreted by the brain. I'm only winding you up, John, but John, you are a lover. You're not the kind of robot guy, and you're certainly not going to be one of these fools that take one of these good-looking robot companions as you get later on in life, that's for sure. Tony, he's no fan of the robots, is our Johnny?
No, he isn't. You're a hugger. It's a good thing you're across the Atlantic on the other side, my friend. I don't want a hug from you. I'm too manly for that. Sorry, dude. Sorry. Anyway, okay, so Science Magazine, present day article, February 19, 2017. Robert F. Service is the author of What Artificial Intelligence Grows a Nose. Well, you know, I seem to remember a nursery rhyme, something about Pinocchio telling lies and his nose growing. I think that might apply here. But anyway, I digress. I'm going to take just one snippet out of this. Now, he's referring back into 2015. Again, all this historical is necessary. But he's talking about in 2015, Meyer and his colleagues set up this is the acronym, DREAM, set up the DREAM Olfaction Prediction Challenge. They divided the Rockefeller Group's data set into 3 parts. Participants were given the volunteer ratings for 2/3 of the odors along with the chemical structure of the molecules that produce them. Okay, so I won't go into a whole lot of that, but there's a couple of things that should jump out at you. Why did they use the word dream? Why is the Rockefeller Group involved in this? And all I'm saying, folks, is why does a computational machine need to be able to smell? There are applications, as we discussed at the beginning of the show, like, you know, being able to detect explosives and, you know, benevolent things like that would be all wonderful and what have you. My point here is human 2.0, biology. They need to be able to replicate the senses for the new life form that they are creating to replace us. Because if they have said in the popular culture, as well as the white papers, they want to birth a new race of beings. You can look at the New Age agenda, look at the New Agers. Their whole thing is the ascension scenario. That's human 2.0. For some reason, mankind is just, and I'm going to say it specifically, it is hell-bent on replacing us. There is nothing benevolent going on in any discipline of science today. None. They can say all they want about cures for cancer and Alzheimer's and everything else. Kev, we covered something very nefarious as just a little sidebar. You remember when we talked about the guys in Silicon Valley receiving blood transfusions from children? Yeah, that's all this vampire agenda. This is all this Frankenstein agenda. This is all, and it was right out in the open. It was for the purpose of extending life, human longevity. And I take us back to Dr. Craig Venter, and the name of his institute in La Jolla, California, is the Human Longevity Institute. Everything is about defeating death, replacing us with a new life form, a new race of beings. Go ahead.
They were even hiding this in plain sight, because I'm sure some of the audience out there, you'll have watched Mike Judge's latest sitcom, and that's called Silicon Valley. Now, it's about a startup over there, but in one of the episodes, there's a character called Gavin Belson, and he's like the head of the Google, the massive corporation. And he's sitting in his mansion, and this young lad comes in, sits beside him, and they start fitting up an IV in between each other. And the main stars of the show are all kind of looking at one another going, what's going on here? And Gavin Belson's like, oh, come on, you haven't made it in the valley until you've got a blood boy. And, you know, here they were hiding it in the open, that this is literally what they're doing in Silicon Valley. They're taking blood transfusions from the young. Then you've got companies like that Ambrosia that we've been covering on the show here for a while now. And that, again, is taking young blood and transfusing it, or actually putting it into people for money, thousands of dollars. This is what your elite characters are doing right now. And it's modern day vampirism.
And that's why they have all of these, series like Twilight and things like that in the movies, is because they want this to make it seem like a normal thing to do, that it's completely acceptable, that there should be no morals and values or mores that would be raised as alarms to counter any of this behavior or any of this activity. The general public has so little access to and so little awareness of what is going on in mainstream science, because they're so distracted by entertainment in all of its various forms. They don't realize what the priesthood is doing to humanity itself. And that is why Johnny Whistles, Kev Baker, Anthony Patch come on here and speak to you as the audience, who is well-informed, who is educated, who are critical thinkers, who then carry the information out after you go out and do your research to prove what we're saying is accurate. Then it is part of your paradigm. You understand it, and you talk to other people about it. Okay? So get the word out there. Talk about what Kev, Johnny, and I are doing to people that you care about. Make people aware. Help them to become critical thinkers. Help them to do their research. Help them to turn off all of this entertainment stuff that distracts them so that they can see what's happening to our reality. Go ahead, sir.
And here is where they actually hide the blood boy in plain sight. Take a listen to this.
In building this peer-to-peer internet, the paradox that we're up against is that people won't want to participate until the quality is high. And the quality won't be high until the quality won't be high until we have a lot of people opt into the network. So that presents a little bit of a unique...
Continue.
Okay. It presents a bit of a problem. That we kind of need to build.
Sure. Everything okay?
I don't know. Is it?
Oh, sorry. Guys. Bryce. Guys.
Actually, we've met.
Oh. Hey, Donald.
It's Jared now.
So, Gavin. Bryce is...
very discreet. Keep going. This is great.
Is Bryce your assistant?
No, of course not. My transfusion associate.
Which is?
Are you really not familiar with parabiosis?
Say that I am.
Well, the science is actually pretty fascinating. Regular transfusions of the blood of a younger, physically fit donor can significantly retard the aging process. And Bryce is a picture of health.
You must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back, everyone. And it's, we're kind of lucky we made it back there. We were getting engrossed in conversation, myself, Anthony Patch, and Johnny Whistles during the break, that I almost missed the clock for coming back to speak to all of you great people who are tuned in live tonight. And thanks again for your continued support. It means the world to us. It really does. And before the break, I was playing a clip from Mike Judge's sitcom called Silicon Valley. And right there, in plain sight, they were hiding something called parabosis. And this was one of your tech kind of gurus from Silicon Valley. A fictional character, obviously, but you know how they love to hide things in plain sight. And he's openly sitting there getting a transfusion from somebody younger than him because it'll rejuvenate his blood. Tie that in with all the research and the links and the startup companies in Silicon Valley in the real world, and you'll see that it's not so fictional after all. And this is the kind of sick, kind of twisted games that these elites are into, all to cheat death. Sounds crazy, but you have to look at it from their point of view, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. Now, we're going to get controversial here in the last segment of the show. And I say that because you absolutely know I idolize Elon Musk. The chat room are throwing things at the monitors right now. Tony's getting ready to explode. Whistles is shaking his head so hard if he was a dynamo, he could power Scotland for a year. But I tell you what, folks, this is the kind of story here. This is why I like Elon Musk. Because in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, as much as 97% of Puerto Rico remains without power. Tesla is lending a hand by sending hundreds of its Powerwall systems to supply energy. Now, this comes from futurism.com, and it says, in a continued streak of goodwill during this year's devastating hurricane season, Tesla has been shipping hundreds of its Powerwall batteries to Puerto Rico in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. Since the hurricane hit on 20th of September, much of the US territory has been left without power. In fact, about 97% as of the 27th of September, hampering residents' access to drinkable water, perishable food, and air conditioning. The island's hospitals are struggling to keep generators running as diesel fuel dwindles. Now, installed by employees in Puerto Rico, Tesla's batteries could be paired with solar panels in order to store electricity for the territory, whose energy grid may need up to 6 months to be fully repaired. Several power banks have already arrived to the island and more are en route. Now, debuted in 2016, the latest Powerwall model has a capacity of 13.5 kilowatt hours. And according to Engadget, Tesla is currently working with local organizations to identify the best locations for the power banks. And as the New York Times reported, restoring power to Puerto Rico will be both difficult and expensive. Transformers, poles, and power lines snake from coastal areas across hard-to-access mountains. In some cases, the poles have been maneuvered in place with helicopters. Tesla's Powerwall systems could provide life-saving energy while these repairs are in process. So unlike many of these billionaire, millionaire cats who ask us to send a couple of dollars, here's a guy, Elon Musk, who has the ability to do something practically with his batteries. And you know what, guys? He's gone and done it. And aside from his neural lace and making us like domesticated cats, things like that, it's this side of Elon Musk that really, really encourages me. And that's why we always say he's kind of like a friend of the show, even if it's tongue-in-cheek, because I really admire the guy. And I'll come to you first, Tony, and then we'll get your thoughts on this one, Johnny.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. I hope that he is doing it out of his own pocket, and he's not doing this with an eye towards being reimbursed through FEMA. So I'll give him on first blush that he's doing it because he's being benevolent and he's being generous. And I think it's a great solution. I think that this is the way that we should be powering our homes and our communities. I do like the Powerwall technology. It's very clean, very efficient, much better than coal and nuclear and even natural gas generation, where you're basically spinning 18th century technology in the form of steam turbines to turn a generator. I mean, that's so old. Now, the Tesla model is the way to go, and I think this is fantastic. Go ahead, sir.
What do you think, Johnny? Do you think this is a good one from Tesla to be getting involved like this? At least he's doing something practical that will help people, right?
Well, it is, Kev. It's a fantastic gesture. And it will help a lot of people. I mean, because that place has been absolutely devastated. But it goes to show, Kev, that we actually are getting to hear about this good thing. And the only reason we get to hear about it is because there isn't any or as many billionaires out there that would actually do something like this. This is what all the billionaires in the world should be doing, helping people like that, like the people in Haiti. You look at Florida when that was getting battered there. Do you know what I mean? This is where all the money should be going, not to put it up in some Rothschild's bank and let it grow off the poor people in the world. So a big up to him, Kev. I take my hat off to him.
Exactly. And instead of sending money to who knows where, like I say, this is very practical. And it is a good system. And, you know, he's just different that way. And it was back in March he kind of got into it on Twitter with somebody from Australia about providing them with one of his megawatt battery factories. And it's coming from Futurism. Again, it comes from the 30th of September, so very recent. It says Elon Musk's promised 100 megawatt battery in 100 days for South Australia is underway. And it says Tesla CEO Elon Musk has announced his contract with South Australia to build a 100 megawatt lithium power storage system. Not only will the system hold the record for highest capacity battery system of its kind, but Musk also aims to construct it in a very short time span, just 100 days. Musk set the deadline for himself in a series of tweets back in March. Now, what started off as a casual internet exchange has blossomed into an international partnership that could provide reliable energy for many Australians who experienced a crisis last year when several parts of the country had power shortages. And it says the Australian summer, with its high energy demands, is just a few months away. But Tesla is off to a phenomenal start to beating the deadline. Musk revealed that about half of the promised capacity was already in place on site, a strong indicator that Tesla will easily glide through in the shorter timeline. Quote, to have that done in 2 months is really pretty amazing. Bloomberg reported that Musk said in a speech on the site of the battery installation, you can't even remodel your kitchen in that amount of time. It serves as a great example to the rest of the world what can be done. And not only will the battery system help Australia prevent power outages, but it will also bolster the country's efforts to transition to clean energy. The goal is for the battery system to be powered by renewable energies like solar and wind farms. And again, Tony, this is just another example of how he's kind of out there. He says he'll do something, and you know what? He'll bloody well get it done.
Yeah, I would imagine that he had a lot of help from the local governments in terms of permits and cutting through the red tape so that when they did break ground, there was nothing to slow them down. So great job, outstanding job. Now, one of the things that is a little side note that you and I have talked about in the past is that each of these facilities that he's going to be building in the United States as well, they are all oriented to the north.
And they're all shaped like diamonds as well.
Yes, they are. They're shaped like my good old diamonds. So we won't get into that too deeply, but there are mystical undertones to these power plants, these power cells, these batteries. They're really power cells being oriented to the north. And those that understand what I'm saying, understand what I'm saying. Kev, I would like to talk about geomancy again, and unless you guys have something further.
I would love you to get into geomancy, and just that Elon Musk, the fact that he has a line in his megawatt factories, or whatever the heck he wants to call them, gigawatt factories, that's it, to true north. I mean, here's another example again of how these billionaires, these people that make it to that kind of elite class, they are very well aware of the kind of spiritual and energetic things that are going on, not only on the planet, but all around us. And they tap into these things. And Elon Musk aligning those things to true north, absolutely no different. Now, we were talking about IBM earlier on, Dr. Watson. That's what they're pushing on us. But of course, if we go back to World War II, I'm sure everyone out there is very well aware of IBM's role with the Nazis. Now, we were talking about this last week with Tony, and the subject of geomancy came up. We were looking at the kind of punch cards that were coming out of the IBM machine, and then we were learning all about what, for me anyway, Tony, was a new subject altogether, geomancy. So I will hand it back to you to find out all the latest on this, because this, again, is another fascinating topic.
Yeah, geomancy is, in its simplest form, it is making marks in the sand. It's drawing in the sand. It's communicating in the sand. Geomancy is derived from the Latin geomantia, which in turn is derived from the Greek for divination by earth. Often stones or sticks were thrown down to arrive at an answer. Maybe that's where we get our Sticks and stones may break our bones, but names will never hurt me, a children's rhyme. Drop the fateful stone or stick of judgment, and you are the target of a deadly onslaught. Now, that are the words of author Kathleen M. Urquhart, who is the author of this article in the October issue of Entangled magazine that she put together regarding geomancy, and more specifically, one of the geomantic charts, which is called Populus. And I said at the beginning of the show, if people would go to their search engine and look up Populus, but you can also look up VIA, V-I-A, which is called the way. Populus is called the people. Now, she is writing an article entitled Populus, the Book of Daniel is Open. So I'm going to take just a couple little pieces out of here, but she does a fabulous job of laying out, again, the 16 charts that make up the divination process of geomancy. Now, the cover of our magazine has a picture of Jesus Christ, and he is joined by the woman who is facing stoning at the hands of the crowd and the Pharisees. And this is John 8, 2-11. I'm just going to read a couple of lines from this. Early in the morning, speaking of Jesus, he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law of Moses commanded us to stone such. What do you say about her?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger in the sand. As they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote with his finger in the sand. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the eldest, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus looked up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and do not sin again." The emphasis I placed here, folks, which is also in a very ancient painting of Jesus Christ depicting this scene with the woman and the Pharisees, is also replicated in a even more ancient picture that is Arabic in origin. Now, this is important that you grasp the significance of what Kathleen Urquhart is revealing to you. As far as she and I have been able to determine, no one in the open has ever stated that geomancy applied to this description of Jesus Christ in Scripture, writing in the temple on the ground. Many of the translations say that he was writing on the stone floor of the temple, whereas, and this may be a Mandela effect, I'm not sure, Kev, but my recollection, because I've been reading the Bible nearly all my life, is that the word was sand, that he was writing in the sand. That is geomancy. I do not believe that mainstream churches' theology want people to understand that Jesus Christ understood, as did Daniel, understood the practice of geomancy as practiced by the Pharisees. The Pharisees were practitioners of the black arts, the forbidden arts. He was communicating to them in their own black art language, in writing in the sand, geometric figures. He prescribed in the sand populus. That's why the figure populus has been on the August and September issues of Entangled magazine. We are speaking to the elite in the occulted mystical societies. We are telling them that we know that Jesus knew the language of the Pharisees and that they were practitioners of the black arts. They had no right to be accusing him of something, to judge him. And what he did was allow them to save face by merely writing in the sand, and they saw that he understood their language, yet he said nothing to them to condemn them. He allowed them to save face and simply walk away from the crowd. The crowd had no idea what he was writing in the sand, but the Pharisees knew how to define and divine, D-I-V-I-N-E, divine what he was writing. He wrote populus and he wrote via. You will not find that in mainstream religion today. This is a huge revelation given to Kathleen Urquhart by the Holy Spirit. Those of you out there that know your Bible, and those of you that are out there that know about geomancy, only the people at the top echelons of the occult realize that Jesus Christ wrote in their language in the sand and communicated to them in the sand in their own language and pointed the finger silently at them and said, "Go away. I know that you are possessed. I know that you are evil. Do not accuse me as the Son of God." Why does this have importance today? I follow up Kathleen's article with my article saying the connection, the roots of origin, D-Wave and geomancy. D-Wave's adiabatic quantum computers have everything to do with the practice of geomancy. That's why their 16th model is the 16th model, because there are 16 figures in geomancy. Kev, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'm telling you, people need to read this article from Kathleen in detail because she gives the details of what I did as an overview. Believe me, this has already risen to the highest echelon of the practitioners of the dark arts, and they want to know, how is it that she knows this? She got it from the Holy Spirit. That's the only way she could get it, because she had no clue about geomancy up until about 2 weeks ago when she and I finally looked into this because of the leadings of the Holy Spirit. So there you go, my friend. That's why it's on the cover of the October issue of Entangled magazine. This is huge.
Well, my mum says that's definitely one of these Mandelas that they're hitting you with, Tony, but that really is huge. It really is. And you know, when you're talking there about this geomancy and stuff like that, writing in the sand in particular, my mind was immediately cast to that weird, creepy symmetry video that came out of CERN, Tony, where you had them dancing, making circles on the sand. And then, of course, when it comes to witchcraft and stuff like that, you see the circles, the witch's circle. So this geomancy, this kind of communication, if you want to put it that way, this is something that's been in our faces for a while now, especially if you think of that symmetry video is tying in with this.
Yes, indeed, it does. And if people want proof, they need to read the magazine. I gave you the overview. I did not give you the definitive, absolute proof, because you have to read it. You have to see the images. You have to get the context of it and the details. Kathleen did a fabulous job of proving that Jesus Christ communicated to the Pharisees in their own language. This is why the Pharisees wanted to crucify him, because he knew that they were practitioners of the dark arts. This is why the book of Daniel was sealed up. God said to Daniel, seal up the book until the latter days, because what Daniel was trained in, why he was able to interpret Nebuchadnezzar's handwriting on the wall scenario, he was able to do what the other learned men of Nebuchadnezzar could not do. Daniel interpreted the handwriting on the wall because he understood geomancy. The handwriting on the wall was a form of geomancy. It is necromancy, communicating with the dead. Daniel interpreted it because he knew the process of geomancy, of divination. And God said to him upon the conclusion of this interpretation of the handwriting on the wall, close up the book, do not participate in the black arts any further. You've applied it as I've directed you to apply it, but you are to no longer practice geomancy, Daniel. The book is now open, folks. And again, Kathleen shows you the proof of that. The book has been open because these are the last days. Okay? It was the king's dream. I stand corrected. I'm running too fast at the thoughts here. It wasn't the handwriting on the wall. It was his dream that was interpreted. But it was using the geomancy to interpret it because of the symbolism in the dream that he was able to apply to that. Bottom line here, folks, is the book of Daniel is open. And because of that opening, I think that's why the Holy Spirit shared with Kathleen the accurate interpretation of what Jesus Christ was described in the Bible as writing and drawing in the sand. Pure geomancy. Go ahead, sir.
And that is all in this latest edition of Entangled magazine. You can get that over at anthonypatch.com. I urge you all to go and check that one out. And you know, it's almost time up again for another night. And Tony, you're having to cram things in there. There was me thinking when we took the 2-hour show, it'd be easier to get everything done, right?
We still need another hour a day, my friend, but I know there's no way that either one of us would have the energy for that.
There definitely isn't enough hours in the day. And Tony will be back with us on Wednesday night when we're going to have author and researcher Gary Wayne on the show with us, right?
Oh, yeah, fabulous. He and I have been emailing back and forth, and he will be bringing in his deep, deep research that really coincides with the things you and I have been talking about, Kevin, is also a favorite research source for Kathleen Urquhart as well. She's a big fan of his work, and we're going to look at Genesis. That's his focus. We're going to look at Genesis and the application as to today. And again, I want to say again, Entangled Magazine is available in print, color, and black and white through my website. And that's thanks again to Robbie and Cheryl. Just tremendous. These are definitely collector's items, folks. These are more like books. Each one since June is now available through anthonypatch.com.
And of course, Johnny, we've got Gary Wayne's book as well, all about Genesis. So that'll be a good show on Wednesday. And tomorrow night, Johnny, Ben Emlyn Jones is going to be live with us here. And of course, he is the UK's UFO mastermind for 2017.
Oh, I know. Fantastic. I mean, what a great thing for it to happen to the big man, because, as you know, Kev, he is an absolute gentleman, and I love him to death. Can't wait to see. That's 2 fantastic shows coming up.
It really is. And tomorrow night.
And a third one. Friday, my show with you, Kev. Our friend David Heavener, who was on last Friday, will be on again. He is going to bring a mystery guest from Hollywood. A very well-known name from Hollywood will join us on Friday.
Whoa, talk about dangling the carrot, Mr. Patch. I have taught you well. But all of that is to look forward to. And of course, don't go anywhere, because coming up after the break, it'll be Quantum Connections with Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew. And like I say, I'll be back here, same time, same place, tomorrow night with Ben Emlyn Jones. And he's the guy that I call the Fox Mulder of the UK. And like Johnny says, there's not a nicer guy that you could meet. So tomorrow night we'll be getting into all the kind of UK UFO stories, all the paranormal stuff, even the geopolitics as well, because Ben is very much like the Kev Baker Show. He goes here, there, and everywhere, because it's all about seeking truth. And that is why we're here. So until tomorrow night, wherever you are, make it TFR.
And dinna touch that dial.
God bless you all. Good street sense that I'm providing to you. Know your exits, whether you're inside a building or you're in a outdoor venue like this. People have said, well, we had to, hop fences and things like that. Well, that's typical. So know where your outs are. Something goes down. You don't have to think. You don't have to look. You can react because that's what your body's going to do. It is just going to react. From my training in the military as well as a paramedic, it's your training that you fall back on instinctively, and your training carries you through the event. Your training is based upon pre-planning of an area you're entering, knowing your exits, and then allowing your instincts to take over, because they will in a panic situation. And therefore, you can have the presence of mind to head opposite to where the flow of the crowd is going. And in this case, I'm advising you, go 90 degrees, seek your cover and concealment, and stay there until law enforcement gives you the all clear.
Absolutely. And like I say, when most of these events unfold now, I've been caught out in the past where I have ran with some of the rumours, some of the disinformation that comes out in the immediate aftermath of these events. And what I tend to do now is just to let the dust settle. There's a few strange things, right enough, that has cropped up with this today, namely the shooter himself. This is a Stephen Paddock, 64. I mean, they spoke to this guy's family, Tony. I mean, there's been no kind of indication anything like this was ever going to be happening with this individual. I know we're hearing rumours now that he may have converted to ISIS recently. He may have had Antifa literature and memorabilia in the room, all of which pure conjecture. But there's something almost, if we were going more generic and talking about these events, not looking at the Las Vegas one, Tony, it'd be very easy to set somebody up in a hotel room and then leave propaganda lying around that would point to one group or another that would again stoke division. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, that's a typical modus operandi for these scapegoat shooting situations. I'm not saying that it's pertinent to this one. It may come out, but my approach is yours, and that is I'm just going to let the information flow, let it come out from whatever sources, and then, just examine it myself. My approach at this point is really just prayers for the victims, the survivors, and their families, and those that know these people that are the victims, and also the first responders, having been one for many years. This is hard on first responders, paramedics.
Anyone that listens to the Kev Baker Show knows that I rarely commit very early when it comes to these events. We're going to have to wait to see what happens as the information comes to us, because in the immediate hours after these things, all of it's really just hearsay, just rumours, and we can't really base any real opinion on that. But you can bet your bottom dollar that no matter what kind of agenda they play out in the background to this, the motives that this man may or may not have had, this is going to be used to divide people in America yet again. At a time when the national anthem and taking the knee's been used to divide people in America. You've got Antifa talking about some kind of uprising in October that's going to bring down the government. And right now, when I look in at America from the outside, it's in a very, very perilous position indeed. So joining me tonight to briefly touch upon this and to get into a whole lot more is my good friend, colleague here on the network, Mr. Anthony Patch. And of course, Anthony comes with a 27-year background being a paramedic up in the Oakland area. So when it comes to these situations, unfortunately, Tony has first-hand experience. But Tony, I woke up this morning and got me up to watch the news unfolding. And like I said there in opening, it's hard to talk about because it's just terrible. An act of pure evil, as Donald Trump said. But when we listen to those rounds popping off constantly, a pause, reload, going again, I honestly thought we'd be looking at a death toll into the hundreds, Tony.
Yeah, I echo that with you. I am quite surprised that we didn't have 100 to 200 people that were mowed down. This was a shooting gallery. This was a position of high advantage as a active shooter situation. I will offer this right off the bat, folks. If you find yourself in a panic crowd situation, as Kev said, I've got the background to be able to give you this advice. The crowd will tend to run in one direction, go 90 degrees opposite, okay? Go 90 degrees to the flow of the crowd. Therefore, you will not be trampled. Most people are injured and even killed in stampedes beyond the death toll due to the actual bomb or shooting event. So go 90 degrees to the flow of the crowd and you will find cover and concealment much more readily, and avoid the crowd. I'm not saying avoid venues like this. I'm just saying if you're going to go to, soft target venues like this, crowd psychology takes over, fight or flight, and you need to think above that. You need to think if you're going to be in a crowd situation, a venue such as this, think about it ahead of time. What would I do? This is not paranoia. This is just things like that. There are some things you can reach out to, but you really have to look at it in the context of what we're going to share with you tonight. We've got a couple of articles, a couple of research papers we're going to give you some details on because we're covering science here tonight. And that is, why do the machines have to have all five senses? I mean, really, we're talking about a computational device.
Tony,
and
can
yet,
I give you my initial thought on that, just as you're in there, because we've looked at Geordie Rose, and he's talking about kindred AI and the need to actually let these robots and the AI grow up in the real world. That will lead to consciousness. Now, putting myself in their shoes, going down their kind of level of thinking, maybe they're seeing the five senses that we have as being an integral part of that consciousness spark. So if they can give the AI as close or as artificial a copy of what we've got, voila, they'll get their consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. You don't want it to be, going through sensory deprivation, so to speak. So I would agree with you. Yeah, it does enhance, it does help with that whole idea of consciousness and then sentient awareness. So I'll give it that much. Sure. Yeah.
Of course, you could always just have it into the airports and everything else. I mean, you could have it in the hotels now, smelling for gunpowder and stuff like that. That'll be the next thing in these kind of mega cities, the smart cities like we've got here in Glasgow. It's going to be smelling everything in your bags.
Yeah, in the United States, they use beagles as bomb detection devices because of their profound sense of smell. So I could see it being used for things like that, and that's beneficial. Those are benevolent applications. But I think where you and I are going is that it does add to this whole thing of replicating human beings and being able to supplant and, somehow surpass the human being. But I've said it before, in the last couple of weeks, I've been ranting about, God is not going to allow AI ever to even equal, much less exceed the human brain's capabilities, and that he is actually transforming and augmenting our minds, our brains, our quantum computers as I speak. But I won't go down that road today. We're going to stick to the nuts and bolts.
Well, I was waiting for you there, Tony.
That's okay. So we're also going to touch on later on in the show, we're going to go into the October issue of Entangled magazine. It is out. Subscribers got them hot off the press right at 1 minute after midnight on the first of medics, EMTs, police officers, firefighters. And then in the hospitals, you have the emergency rooms being overrun. You had pickup trucks with victims dropping people virtually at the front door of the hospital unannounced. And when you're in a hospital situation, you don't really know what's going on in the outside world. And all of a sudden you are inundated in a mass casualty event. And they train for this. There's protocols. But it takes time to call in extra staff. It takes time to bring in surgeons from home, things like that. And it's really, really hard on the hospital staff as well. So I would urge folks to extend your prayers to the folks that have to take care of the victims, because they're human beings as well. And this can really traumatize even the most hardened when you are overwhelmed with numbers of victims and you don't have the psychological preparation that is afforded to you when you hear the paramedics call into the emergency room and they're giving their report as they're transporting, and you know what's coming and you can be prepared for it. But when it drops in your lap, even in an emergency room situation, it is really tough to deal with in the moment. And then usually about 24 hours later, the staff begin to feel the psychological effects of what they've just been confronting. So a lot of victims to go around, and that's where my thoughts and prayers and concentration is on right now, rather than the conspiratorial. And I think, Kev, you'll echo that with me.
Absolutely. Well said, Tony, because a lot of the time we do forget the effect that this will have on the emergency responders. You know, we sit and we analyse these things and look for crisis actors here and indiscrepancies there, but the real human cost of this, and you're right there, and I've often thought about this in the past. I mean, I could not do the kind of work that you used to do, Tony, the work that these brave men and women do in the hospitals as well. So I take my hats off to all of them, and obviously thoughts and prayers go out to anyone affected by this. So then, Mr. Patch, where are we going to start tonight? Because you were telling me something about how AI can smell me now, and that doesn't sound good at all.
Yeah, so here's the question I'll put out to the audience. We think of AI as something that is basically a computational machine. And if it is being designed and touted for things like, you know, medical breakthroughs and other things, why? Why does a machine need to be able to smell? Yes, you can apply it to things like detection of, you know, food contamination, food that is spoiling.
Seeking answers to age-old questions, deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media. This is the Kev Baker Show. And now, here is your host, Kev Baker.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Another week of live radio right here with me, your host, Kev Baker. You guessed it, right time, right place for the Kev Baker Show live. Right here on Truth Frequency Radio, and that's tfrlive.com. Hope you've all had a really nice weekend out there. I totally unplugged from the Matrix over the weekend. My batteries are recharged and I am raring to go. We'll get a bit of housekeeping out of the way first before we get into this tonight, because we're obviously going to be joined by my good friend, fellow host on the network, Anthony Patch. He's here with me tonight. Then tomorrow night, Ben Emlyn-Jones. He is back with us. We'll be catching up on his recent award-winning experience where he won the UFO Mastermind Award in the UK. And then we've got Gary Wayne. We'll be catching up with Tony about that as the show progresses, because that's going to be a really big show on Wednesday night. And then to round off the week, one of my favourite guests, one of the best guys in the whole world, Bill Bean. He's going to be back on here, the spiritual warrior. So another huge week of radio right here on the Kev Baker Show. And you know, it's a very, very sad day because America witnessed its most brutal massacre overnight. And this was, of course, in Las Vegas, when 58 people so far have lost their lives, over 500 injured, after a gunman opened fire from a 32nd floor hotel window of the Mandalay Bay Hotel in Las Vegas. Now, just across the road from that hotel was a rock concert going on. And this was the Route 91 Harvest Festival. It was all country and western music. Over 20,000 music goers there, men, women and children. And I woke up this morning to footage and the audio of what had been unfolding in Las Vegas overnight. And when I first heard those shots ringing out, I must admit I feared the worst. And by that I mean I feared actual kill rate, if that's the right way to put this, far, far higher than the 58 we have seen so far. Now, it's far too early to call this anyway false flag, real event. Who honestly knows?